Hello everyone, welcome back to another short update on Kwyll. It's a little bit short in between the last one and this one, but that was more due to delays in the last one than anything else. So I just want to try and get back onto schedule again of releasing new update devlogs on a Sunday where possible. This one's a little bit different to the last one, not so much work on logic and game logic elements, more a completely different area. So one of the things that's been bugging me for a little while is how the collision detection, in particular collision detection with the background, was implemented. Anyone who's seen the previous videos where I introduced that feature, you'll see that it basically works by assigning a solid flag to a tile. So when you're painting tiles in the room editor, you can define for each tile whether it's solid or not. And if you remember, the standard room had walls around the outside that were marked as solid and a plant pot based of tiles that was marked as not solid, so the player could walk through it. Now my concern around that was firstly not very flexible. I really wanted at some point in the future to introduce the idea of being able to collide and not collide from different sides, which is important for things like platformers, so you can actually jump through a platform from below but not fall through it from above, things like that. So that was always on the cards, and the initial plan based on the existing system was just to have multiple flags or attributes on a tile that defined which direction it was solid in and which directions it wasn't. My concern then became, what if you wanted to use the same tile bitmap but for different collision scenarios? You'd have to either reproduce the bitmap or duplicate the bitmap using more memory than is ideal, so that it could be used for the different collision types, or I would have to introduce some system that would allow you to combine a collision definition and a bitmap so that you could share them. Either way just sounded very clunky or felt very clunky to me, and very less than ideal. So I started doing a little bit of research on what other similar tools were out on the market that dealt with this sort of problem. And I came across a cool product called GB Studio. If anyone's not aware of it, I highly recommend you take a look at it. It's a very cool tool for creating games on the Game Boy series of devices from Nintendo. It is very good, highly recommended, very fun. If you're into this sort of retro game creation and you haven't seen it before, I highly recommend you have a look. But what it does is slightly different to what I was originally doing, and very much akin to the attribute painting that we've already got in Kwyll, where in the room, I'll go into this when I show you the room editor in a moment. I'm trying not to go into the room editor too soon because there's a lot of changes in there and it will give the game away a little bit, so I'm just trying to explain a little bit more ahead of actually going in and showing. So what GB Studio does is, in the same way that Kwyll can do painting of color attributes over a map, so you draw your sprite, your tiles as black and white bitmaps, and then you paint the color over the top. It allows you to paint attributes for collision detection as a layer above or alongside the other data, the tile data and the color data in Kwyll's case. And I thought that sounded like a really good way. Separate the actual collision information from the visual, from the map itself. So that's what I've done. I've implemented a way of doing that, both in the editor and with a little bit of work on the Spectrum side. I'm not entirely happy with the way the Spectrum side works, but it works and can be improved and optimized later. Just wanted to get the actual structure down. So without further ado, I'll go into the editor and we'll have a quick look at how it works. So I'll load up the standard game test, which I've modified to support this new system. So there's a lot of new things going on in here that you may notice. So before we had the palette and the brightness, now we've got these things down here, which I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment. And you'll notice over here, if you compare it to the previous video, underneath this tile editor you had a solid flag and a button to open up further attributes. They're not needed anymore, so the tiles still retain the ability to have attributes or arbitrary attributes assigned to them, but we're just not using it at the moment. It might come back if I want to assign different information to tiles for use elsewhere in the game, but for now I've just turned that off and disabled it. So if I go quickly to just show you the rim's not changed, so if I go quickly to here and show it now, because I've turned off the collision flags, you can walk through everything, so there's no collision anymore with any of the objects, any of the scenery, the tile map. You can just walk through it freely. So the way this now works is largely around this item here, which is, I'm not sure about the icon at the moment, but it's basically a collision definition. So it defines the sides which are solid. So if you do that, then all sides are solid and the entire cell in the tile map will be impenetrable. But if you do, for example, that, then you'll be blocked coming in from the right towards the left, but you can walk through from the left towards the right because this side is not marked as not colliding. So you can set any combination of these, and then what happens is if you click in the middle, it switches mode. So much like you had a mode switch between painting and tiles, which down here is illustrated by the tool that you're painting with. If you click on this, it switches into a new mode, which is painting collision maps. And as you can see, we've got an indicator down here of what elements are solid as we paint them. So if I do that, it just goes completely solid. So for the sake of this simple part of the demo, we just want it solid. So the walls are 2 tiles thick. We don't care about the outside, and this is important because anything that you're unable to actually get to as a player, don't bother putting anything on there in terms of collision if you can't ever get to it, because it saves on the data that gets exported. So if we start painting with this, you'll see it paints this tile in semi-transparent over the top of the map. So these are all now completely solid cells, and the player should not be able to get through them. So that's the simplest way of doing that. I could get more complicated with only doing the left side, but it really doesn't matter in this case because you can never get from the other side anyway, so it's just simpler. And this additional feature down here is for controlling the layers. So as I was doing this, I decided it becomes sometimes a little bit difficult to see what you're doing depending on the colours of the tiles and so on and so forth. So now you can switch off the individual layers and just look at, so this is switching off the tiles and just looking at the collision layer in isolation, and then turn off the collision layer so you can see the tiles in isolation. So just a convenience there for doing those things. In the same way as all other painting operations, left button paints the current with the current brush, and right button removes it. So that's all the same. I think that's pretty much it. So if I now go back to the preview and run, in theory you should no longer be able to walk through the walls because it now detects collision against that separate map. It's not related to the tiles themselves anymore, it's related to just that additional information, which is completely separate. So you could, in theory, put some collision in here, for example, which isn't associated with anything in the background, but will still prevent you getting through in the same way in both directions. So just an invisible blockage. This gives a little bit more, in fact quite a lot more freedom to define how the player can get around within your world without having to worry too much about defining different tile types. You can reuse your tiles as you see fit for different things, and you don't have to worry about setting different flags on each tile or duplicating the tiles to get them for multiple uses. So the other thing that wanted to touch on was the idea of different collision different collision types. So we've got these additional tiles here that we haven't been using up until now. So if I paint a few of those in and then switch excuse me, switch the collision map to just top, so it's showing here that only the top side will block, and then paint with that, you'll see we have this I turn off the tile. As you can see, we just have this top layer here, so the engine will notice that you'll collide when you approach it from above, but when you approach it from the bottom you won't. So if I go back to preview, we can demonstrate that. So if I now go onto the platform, I can't get through the platform from the top, but if I approach it from underneath, I can go through it freely. And that works in exactly the same way for all the other sides. So you've got a lot more freedom of defining how the collision works for different game types. So that's basically it. I'll just very quickly paint that area before saving, and I'll just quickly show that it works theoretically in the Spectrum emulator. So I'll just quickly show you what the code looks like, what's different in terms of the exported code. So if we go down to the room definition, that first room, which is way down here now, we've got the tile excuse me, the tile maps, which is a span array as before, the attributes for the color mapping, and then you've got this new collisions value here, which is an encoded representation of all the tile maps. So it tries to squish things down. It's basically a very dumb run length encoding for anyone who understands that. So it won't use a full 32 by 24 amount of memory. It's dependent very much on the number of tiles that you have marked as collisions, so it should hopefully make it a little bit more efficient in terms of memory. And then this information is what's used elsewhere in the engine to control and detect collisions. Okay, so if I export that now to the emulator, hopefully everything should go according to plan. Save it to the usual place. I'll fast forward past the compilation phase as usual. Just check that it seems to have worked. Yeah, that's all looks good. So I'll shut that down. Switch to the emulator and load our game. And if everything works, we should see the same result here. So, yep, not able to walk through the surrounding walls. We're okay walking through the plant because no collision map was set up for that. This is all solid, and the platform is solid from the top and not solid from the bottom. So everything works there too. So that's a new way of doing collision detection that hopefully will be a little bit more efficient, easier to manage, and just make creating the games a little bit more fun. That's it for this time. So as usual, please don't forget to leave a comment, leave a like if you like what you see, and subscribe if you want to be kept up to date, and pop over to the Ko-fi page and leave some comments there as well.